I mean, I got mugged at gunpoint skating down at Meanwhile.
Really?
Yeah. You know, wherever we were going skating, it was almost a given that you were going to have an altercation with someone that was trying to rob you.
So subversive culture.
You know, skateboarding then, it was completely different to how it is today, because, you know, it was seen as a real degenerate thing to do. You know, there was no future, no hope in that at all. It was very much punk mentality, outcast mentality, which I loved. You know, and I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to have that like crew that I would go skating with, much like you would going out painting. So those two things fed hand in hand, and so you'd stick together. You know, you'd go to these spots knowing that you might run into trouble, and like you look out for each other. So London was rough.
Killa Kela podcast. KillaKelaOfficial.com.
Street Culture TV.
Instagram UK Frontline.
Beatbox created.
Killa Kela.
And we're here to talk about world music and street culture.
Killa Kela.
Got two. Here we go.
It was 600. You'd do a fine one by now, wouldn't you? Ladies and gentlemen, Killa Kela podcast, live and direct. Central London, or as central as you need to be. Could be, should be, do be. Which part you be from? If you're from the UK and you've been privy to the street culture that's been happening, then you'll know that 600 plus is nothing to be sniffed at. To the internationals and the people who have just joined us, welcome, spread the love, send a cheer, tell a friend, all that good stuff. Okay, people, our sponsors, the mighty GK Nifty Heads, have 10,000 play-to-earn GraffPunks NFTs to give away. Get ready as London's white trash goes blockchain digital with Bitcoin Cash tokens locked into them to claim. Get yourselves over to the website gkniftyheads.com and play to earn now. Inside the house, we have an international traveller. Someone that started with marker pens to spray paints, to stickers, to posters, to bigger walls, to bigger buildings, to bigger countries, inside, outside, installations, exhibitions, from books to stickerings, paraphernalia, the kind of things that gets my fanboy up to 50. Dface in the building!
Thanks very much. That's a huge big up. Thank you, brother.
Hey, look, what can't speak, can't lie. If you aren't watching and you're just listening, this has just been gifted to the Kells, which I'm absolutely fucking buzzing about. Thank you so much, my brother.
You, mate.
And we got T-shirts and pins. Look, you know, I mean, this isn't the shopping channel, so I'm not going to get too deep into it. But on the real though, a proficient expert at the marketing of the brand, and a far cry from those humbled beginnings. But what's interesting is you're constantly evolving and keeping standards up in your output.
Thank you. It's truly trying to get myself interested in what I'm doing, keeping myself out of boredom. You know, it started in that way and it continues that way. I wake up in the morning, I'm like, what crazy shit am I going to concoct today? Yeah. What can I get myself into? And a day rolls into a week, a year, a decade, and 2.5 decades later, here we are.
Yes.
You know, and it feels like just the other day.
Keeping yourself out of trouble by jumping straight into it.
In trouble, yeah. Get as close to trouble as I can. Do you know what I mean? While staying on the safe side of trouble, if that's true. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, just, you know, I'm just concocting shit as I go, Kels. I don't, you know, the thing about what I do, there isn't a job description of it. It's whatever it is I choose it to be, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in lots of different things. So it started in that way and it continues in that way. I'm just trying to keep myself buzzing.
Because it's street, but it leans so much heavy into popular culture. Yeah, it's undefinable. I can't tell whether it's graph or street art. It's just correct.
It's definitely not graph. You know, graph to me is a very specific thing, and it deserves that title, and the people that do it deserve that title
For
too.
sure.
But it borrows from graffiti in terms of an approach or a mindset. And then applies an aesthetic that is not graffiti, but has a similarity to it or leans on graffiti.
Yeah.
But I mean, for me, it started, my interest is from graffiti. My interest is from, as a kid growing up in London, being into graffiti, being into skateboarding. And those two things what distracted me from school, you know, hence failing school. And then trying to find a path with those things that I loved and having no idea and no one to tell me or show me otherwise.
Yeah.
So
That definitely leans into it when I think about this, the kind of characters that you're pulling out for the stickers especially. You're definitely leaning into almost like the skateboarding, the t-shirt culture of that time as well.
That was the very thing that I was inspired by as a kid. You know,
Like Fucked and things like that.
Exactly, and earlier the Jim Phillips artworks for Santa Cruz really early on, and Vernon Courtholt Johnson for Powell, and then the anonymous graffiti that I saw everywhere that I was going skating. You know, unknown heads, but that was vibrant and exciting and interesting. And my mum, being a traditional mum, was like, "Oh, the stuff hanging in the Tate Gallery is what you should be into." And I was like, "This doesn't speak to me in a voice that I understand or can hear, and it feels like these people are past, which they are, and I want something that's talking to me now with the energy of now." And I wasn't getting that from the art galleries, but I was getting that from album cover artwork, t-shirt graphics, skateboard graphics, graffiti. And so it was those things I embraced and absorbed and schooled myself on.
Talk to me about fantastic. Talk to me about the records that inspired you, because that was a crazy time as well, because you had the punk scene, you had the metal scene, you had Eddie and things like that. But then you also, you know, a little later on, you did have the Far Side with the Bizarre Ride album covers and just some crazy, you know, almost conceptualized art that you wouldn't readily find on an exhibition either.
I guess I grew up in a very interesting moment in time, because as a kid, early hip-hop, breakdancing, electro was coming out or coming into the UK. Yeah. And that was something I was like, what the hell is this? What the fuck? I need to get involved in this. But I was a little kid. And so I was buying electro, you know, 1, 2, 3, electro UK. I had a cardboard box folded out and taped together.
The moves on the album cover.
Yeah, and trying to like break dance and like, but being really too young and it didn't really stick with me. But those albums, but then my sister, older than me, was into things like the Meteors and the Cramps. And it was a time where you couldn't be into both. Do you know what I mean? You'll understand that. You couldn't be like, I'm a punk, but I'm also into hip-hop or electro. Like, no. You had to pick a side and stick to that side. But secretly, I was like listening to what my sister was playing and also feeding me. And I was like, man, I kind of like this stuff. And
best of both worlds.
Yeah, so it was, you know, and then tape to taping off of my beatbox at home and like, you know, getting into everything. And then being fed those records. So it was like early Cramps, the Dead Kennedys, the Cult, the Cure, that stuff that really went on to sort of school me on like lettering, because I was like, oh, that's a sick logo. That's a sick artwork. You know, Suicidal
Grateful
Tendencies.
Dead as well, and Jesus and Mary Chain and all these different bands. They were kind of really severely alternative, weren't they?
Yeah.
For their time.
And you dressed like that. You schooled yourself on that, and then you displayed that you were that.
The Cure was the biggest example.
Yeah,
of that.
exactly. You know, backcomb hair, fucking paisley shirts, or polka dot shirts.
DMs and eyeliner.
And I was into it all, and then I gravitated into grunge. You know, things like Mudhoney, more like the Dead Kennedys. And at that point, I was 16. I was riding around on a motorbike, so I started leaning more into that world.
Nice. So you did Dinosaur Juniors and
love
Carter,
things like that. Carter, the Unstoppable. Saw them many times. Gay Bikers on Acid. You know, like these crazy bands that were coming through London and growing up in London. I got to see many of those bands and experience that as a teenager.
See, I was just a shy too young for that.
Yeah,
I used to watch, you know, avidly through the lens of MTV.
Yeah.
But Nirvana, again, all of these bands led heavily on logos and emblems. You know, I don't think anyone will forget the Metallica logo in a hurry. No. If you were doing A levels on any desk, you'd see that
scratched in there, wasn't it? Yeah.
You know,
and like the Dead Kennedys, for me, that was a really iconic logo. The D interlocking D and K.
Yeah.
With like a bevel type, and it was like that was really kind of cool. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. And like the Cult, you know, electric, like a really sort of innate gothic lettering. They were the things that were like inspiring me. I was trying to paint them out on leather jackets and doing that stuff. But simultaneously, skateboarding, being around London, seeing graffiti, trying to catch tags, trying to dabble at being a graffiti writer badly. Yeah. And so it was just, that was part of my world, you know, skateboarding, bands, graffiti.
Yeah, totally. the anarchic side of things. I had Madness on podcast.
Oh, did you see?
Yeah, Lee and Mike. They were the first, arguably the first ever graffiti writers of the UK prior to Futura, etc. They kind of explained the landscape of its time. Could you give us a little bit more of an in-depth, because this isn't too far away from their, the path that they walked. What was London like as a kid growing up?
It was rough, man.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I got mugged at gunpoint skating down at Meanwhile.
Really?
Yeah. Wherever we were going skating, it was almost a given that you were going to have an altercation with someone that was trying to rob you.
So subversive culture.
Skateboarding then, it was completely different to how it is today because, it was seen as a real degenerate thing to do. There was no future, no hope in that at all. It was very much punk mentality, outcast mentality, which I loved. And I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to have that crew that I would go skating with, much like you would going out painting. So those two things fed hand in hand, and so you'd stick together. You'd go to these spots knowing that you might run into trouble, and you'd look out for each other. So London was rough. I'd go down South Bank, and you were always going to get chased off. And the South Bank then was called Cardboard City because of the homeless problem, and the homeless people sleeping down there. Yeah.
So that's where Cardboard City. I'm not London like that. You see, I didn't grow up in London.
Yeah.
But before then as well. So that was a long time ago. So that was where it was it?
Yeah. So growing up around that, you were used to getting chased, to be honest with you, and sticking together and having a pack.
Yeah. Sounds very aggressive.
It was pretty scary times. Yeah. It was scary but fun. Also, there was a sense of freedom. You didn't have mobile phones.
Yeah.
Certainly didn't have social media. So my mum would just be like, "Where are you going?" I'm like, "I'm going skating," and off I'd pop. You know what I mean? I'd go all around London. I'd go over to Romford and skate at Rom and come back home at 7 o'clock at night. My mum had no idea what I'd been doing or what I was up to, and she didn't seem concerned. And that's not to say she wasn't concerned, but there wasn't the worry that I think being a parent now you have.
Yeah, but that muscle memory that you have of being a young person going through what you went through and now seeing it in a more broader context of an age and I don't think there is so much scary shit out there, although, comment below. But a lot of things been appropriated now, hasn't it? And if you're a parent that has experienced something so, intense as the 80s and 90s of in a city, then a sense of relief, I suppose.
I guess the I know I've got two teenagers. Their concerns are different. Their concerns are more online concerns and social media concerns. Really? Yeah, I think so. For me, that seems to be more of a worry than it does going out physically and being feeling like you might be threatened. And I see that still happening. Do you know what I mean? But I feel like their concerns are more in that virtual world rather than the physical world, and I can't say that that's a worse or a better thing. It's probably worse because it seems to be much more in your head than it does a physicality.
Well, then what's in your head dictates what's going on around.
Yeah,
what you see.
And when you're young, you haven't figured out your thought patterns. You haven't figured out who you are. You haven't figured out the way of the world as you see it. Yeah. And so that influence can be a really dangerous thing.
Yeah, your class of artists, which I think hits a real blind spot of within the culture, where you're able to operate at such a speed. Going back to the appropriation thing, I think with what social media does is it creates this world where you're able to do things, create personas, and leverage on the a bit like skateboarders, for instance. The tricks that they do. They must have tried it 80 times, but they always post the 80th one up. And then everyone's moving to that next level, just on the basis of what they've just seen. And it kind of mirrors this. What I feel about your artwork is that it's constant elevating. It's a blind spot so far as people, I don't think they really see how much work you put out. But the truth is that every time you do put out, it's to that high level.
There's a lot of what, a show for me is a year's worth of work.
Yeah.
I can really only do one solo show a year at best. I really want to keep that to one every 2 years because I want the quality. I've always tried to maintain a really high quality of my work, and I've always imagined it to be sat side people in museums from previous historical art movements and it to hold its own. Whether you like it or not, I don't particularly care, but it has to hold its own in terms of it's an art piece and the quality of that art piece. So I have a perfection level that I need to maintain and achieve, and that takes time. There's no substitute for it. Everything's...
Does that make you overcritical on other, are you subjective on what other people do? Or is this part, are you seeing it as one organism? It's just, that's graffiti, that's street art, that's the expression.
I see it, I come through in a time when there wasn't a thing called street art. It wasn't that. It was a few people doing something.
You earlier, you were one of the first people. When I think of you, I think of Toaster, a small handful of others, many of which were just kind of on the stencil scene. But dude, you were, in my mind, you were one of the early adoptees to it.
Yeah, I was lucky to be doing a thing at the time, which I said was I was trying to do something that had a sensibility of graffiti, a mindset of graffiti, like repetition, coverage, bigger, louder, riskier. Yeah. But using a tool set that was different to graffiti. Because I realised I love graffiti, but I realised a lot of people don't love graffiti and they see it as vandalism. So I was like, maybe I can straddle somewhere where it's like, it is vandalism, but is it not so bad? Oh, maybe we could remove it, and maybe I can infiltrate, rot from the inside out rather than from the outside in. Yeah. And so
it changed the landscape.
So I was lucky to be one of the few people doing it at a time. Solo One, Toasters.
Solo One, Toasters, absolutely, wow.
Obviously Banksy was 100%. In there. Shepherd from, Bay from America, London Police, and there was a handful of people that were, and that was, we're already getting international at that point. And so what you have to remember is the early
Milo. Do you remember the Milo?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was an artist, wasn't he? But, he music artist, but he did the whole campaign with the stencils.
Stencils, yeah. And that was the early days of the internet too. It came sort of single at the same time. So we were using the streets to have a voice, to articulate an image, an idea. We didn't have the internet to be able to lean on, to be able to have that voice at that time. We certainly didn't have social media. So it was more about how many stickers you can put up, how many posters can you put up, and hitting it. And Solo was,
Oh, you were up there, dude. I remember going out on campaigns with him, getting a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of different things going on at the time. I mean, sticker campaigns for them, even the club nights, like Mudlums. Do you remember? They're fucking everywhere.
Yeah. And that was the landscape that we were part of, and it wasn't called street art. At the time, people still were kind of like, it's graffiti. Is it graffiti? And they were like, graffiti writers started getting unhappy with it being called graffiti, which I completely respected and understood. And then someone was like, it's street art. And I remember thinking, I really don't like that term. Yeah. It upsets me because it's being categorised and pigeonholed already. Yeah. And I didn't think it was that, and I didn't think it should be that, because for me, it could be everything. Yeah. You know what I mean? It could be music.
Who came up with that name? Do you think it was graffiti writers that called it just to get rid of it?
I always just assumed it was some marketing speak to try and sell it to a brand.
Yeah.
I was like, someone's trying to sell graffiti to somebody, like, let's say Coca-Cola. Yeah. But they can't use the word graffiti because they know it's going to get shut down, so they got street art. It's a bit of a softer, it's got art in the title. Yeah. And I hated it from the get-go. And, that unfortunately stuck in urban art.
I don't see you in the same... maybe it's just an age thing and a period of time where I was privy to see your stuff early. But I put you in the same category as Solo One. It's in that kind of interim that you can't possibly call this, in my opinion, because I know you come from such a lineage of time and pedigree. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I was lucky because it wasn't, like I said, I was doing it. Yeah. I was doing it and there was no means or end to it. I was just doing it. And, it's hard to explain that to people now, like teenagers, because it's a thing.
Was no money in it?
Exactly. I want to be a street artist. It's like you would never fucking think that. You couldn't think that. It's like saying, I want to be a graffiti writer and be famous. It was like, well, the only way you're doing that is to get out there and you're going to be famous amongst the category of people that are paying attention.
You're going to work your tits off,
Yeah, and it's fucking hard work, dude. You're putting in some real time, some legwork. So it was just that. If someone said to me, you'll be able to sell some T-shirts to your mates, I'd have been like, sick. That's dope, if that's what's going to come from this. Never would I have believed, you'd have, 25 years' time, you would have published 3 books, you'd have had museum shows, you'd have done this, done that. I'd never have imagined it, dude. So it's been a wild roller coaster, but it grew organically. I couldn't give you the first lesson in how to become, an artist, because it's not something I pursued. I just fell into it.
That's crazy. Okay, so on that note, what drives you if you can't see the end game, or rather, you ain't anticipating the end game? What drives you to do what you're doing especially that time when there was no social media. What is that?
Well, my kids and my girlfriend would say it's some sort of spectrum disorder that, I'm addicted to putting up stickers. I cannot go anywhere. And like they laugh at it, they're like, if it's going to take us 10 minutes to get there, we've got to factor in
How
another.
many stickers you put up?
Oh, dude, 100,000 plus. Yeah, I mean, literally.
Yeah, I can imagine.
I was trying to figure it out the other day, and I was like, it's hundreds of thousands.
Oh yeah, I would say close to 1 million, to be fair.
Yeah, probably.
Because you've been everywhere. You've been all around the world.
All around the world. All different
I've seen your
types.
stickers I think I've seen your stickers in Tokyo.
Yeah. I've
Do you
been
know what I mean?
Tokyo.
Down in
I've hit
Harajuku.
Tokyo, yeah.
Where the Carhartt store is.
Yeah.
Just like, dude, are you kidding me?
Yeah. The stickers is just like, I don't know why, it just stuck, for want of a better word.
Boom, boom.
And I still now, you know what I mean? And I'm just always trying to figure out how I can get bigger stickers, more prominent places, how I can keep permanence in a city that's fighting back.
Does it keep you up at night? I bet to a certain extent.
To a certain degree, yeah, it does, yeah.
Because it does with a graffiti writer tagging or anybody doing anything.
Well, you're kind of fighting against the system. The system's saying, don't do that thing, and we're going to factor in you not doing that thing and eradicate that thing, and you're trying to figure out a way of fighting against that, and you're a single person, you're not the government with endless resources. If I had endless resources to figure out how I could cover the city, you can imagine what would be going on.
Yeah,
So
you've got endless tenaciousness. That's...
It's, you know what,
tenacity.
it comes down to, like a determination. There's an ego involved in that too, and I don't think that should be undermined. And I don't mean it in like an arrogant way, but there's like something about me where I'm like, I have to keep on doing it, and it's not enough, because it would be easy to go, I've done enough, and like with the murals, I've done 130 murals, and you could easily go, enough, we don't need to keep seeing that shit, dude, stop.
130 murals, yeah? That's fucking crazy.
All around the world, and I never, I've travelled the world with my art, which is unbelievable. I'd never imagined that. My parents were hard-working, working-class people, so I didn't come from a family where we were like, let's go travel. I didn't have a gap year, and I wasn't able to do that. I never factored in travelling. I always wanted to go to America. Could never go to America. Didn't get to America until my late 20s.
That was the same as me, dude. Like, we could never factor, working class. We didn't even have. We went to Sandy Balls maybe like twice. New Forest, 3 times. I won't discredit my parents, but we did go to Canada once, see my family. But the point being is, it wasn't on our list to go on holiday every year. The idea of going around the world doing something you loved, it's just unthinkable. Right?
I mean, my mum doesn't get it to this day. She still doesn't understand it. And bearing in mind, my parents wanted me to go into something that they could tangibly understand as a career. Yeah. So, to say, oh, your son's into art or skateboarding was like saying, you've got no hope, he's a degenerate. So my mum always wanted me to go into the bank. My dad was a panel beater, so he was like, I'll get you an apprenticeship. And I was just like, that's a great profession, Dad, but that's not what I want to do. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. And nobody had explained to me the things I was into could even have a career. So I had to find that path myself.
Wow.
So there was, for a long time, I think my parents had completely given up hope. And they were like, oh, he's fucked.
I think most people that came in from street culture and hip-hop just knew that they had to get their shit together.
Yeah.
You just had to be really good at what you were doing, or at least give it that kind of attention.
Yeah. That's it. And also the attention, the time. Yeah. And then when you see a little opening, you've got to fucking grab it. You've got to get the crowbar in and jank it open.
But that's where the business acumen comes in, because you mentioned earlier about, it wasn't, let alone friends buying T-shirts.
Yeah.
I mean, the commodity that's been created here, that is a far cry from, the obsessiveness. So how do you, to anyone watching that wants to get to this level, and trust me, this is the arguably some of the highest levels of graffiti-based, street art-based, alternative, do it outside and mind your business kind of artwork we've had on this podcast. How did you get to this point?
I can't get. All I can tell you is the journey, which was, I was doing something outside in my spare time. I was working. I was bored in my work, and I was putting in the hours in the evening to put the stuff out there. And it, as we just previously said, it sat within a place and at a time where people were, oh, that's interesting. Yeah. And there was people coming through like Shepherd and Banksy that were paving the way. They were showing that there was this new movement going on, and that you could arguably call it art, and you could potentially buy it. Yeah. And I didn't see that window. I'd hung out with Shepherd when he come over. I used to go, run around bombing with him. I was fortunate enough to know Banksy early on, when he was running Pictures on Walls, and he was like, "Do you want to do a print with Pictures on Walls?" I was doing these Dface £10 notes, and he was really into them.
Yeah, they're cool as fuck, dude.
And I'd worked out how I could...
And the Disney Dface as well.
Yeah, and he was really
sick.
into that. He'd seen those notes that I was spending, and he was like, "I really like that idea." And one of them just happened to be the Queen. I'd figured out I could take the character apart and stick the wings on the Queen with the tongue, and it was like an up you to the royalty. It was like a very English mentality of punk aesthetic, and also it was getting over, but in a way in which your graffiti hadn't done for me at that point.
Punk for sure.
So I took the Queen, the wings on it. Banksy was like, "I like that, let's do it as a print." And that print dropped and sold really well, and I was like, "Oh shit, that's crazy!" Like, I could maybe pay my bills from a print release. Wow. That's quite interesting, because previously to that I'd been, I'd had work. People asked me, "Do you want to put a piece of work in a shop or a spa?" And when we did that, it was like I'm taking what was outside inside, and it wasn't transitioning properly for me. It didn't make sense. I was like, when it's outside, it's disruptive. It's political, even if it's not a political slogan, because you're arguing about space or questioning ownership of space. When you put it inside, it can be anything. So I was like, I need to refine what I'm doing when it goes inside and what that looks like when it goes inside. And it was only because I was questioning myself. I was like, it don't feel real if I'm putting the same thing outside and then same thing inside.
Yeah, got you.
So then I started to try and...
It's an aesthetic.
Work out the aesthetic of what it was that Dface was when it went into a gallery environment. And, it was the first door opening of like, oh, okay, you can do anything. Because up to that point, I was trying to configure it to something that belonged in the street or belonged within a graffiti mindset. Yeah. And at some point when I was like, actually, when it goes inside, it's not graffiti, it's not street art, it's art, and therefore it's anything I choose it to be. Like, the doors are wide open at that point. I was like, fuck, that's fucking
gives you freedom.
Incredible, yeah. I can do anything. And it doesn't have to be with a foot in any camp.
That's interesting.
And so I just tried to perfect and... just push creatively what I was doing, keep myself interested. Yeah. And have a voice that felt relevant to the street. Yeah. I was like, oh, it's like Disney characters, but they're not Disney characters, they're kind of fucked up. They're of today's society rather than, a rose-tinted spectacles American. Yeah. It's the kids that like tags, it's the kids that like graffiti, it's the kids that like hip-hop and punk. Yeah. That's my characters, that's what they are, they're disruptive.
And how do you get that, how do you translate? It's interesting you think that way, or had thought that way about the transferal of contemporary art outside back in, still retaining its level of street. But I think punk, there's a huge amount of value in creative freedom within punk. It's the cut and paste, don't give a fuck. I mean, big up Noki and Judy Blame, and people of that era, ID Magazine era, where they were really going, Normski, all the people that were really pushing boundaries on how they were being creative. Kind of reminds me of that in a way.
Yeah, it's, when I was at college, I was really inspired by Carlos Segura from T26, Neville Brody, David Carson. And it was that early cut and paste, but with a little bit of computer technology. So still hands-on, but still using computers. And it, I was working in an industry where I had computers, I had big format printers, I had spray pen and marker pens. So I had the ability to make all these things using all of this equipment. And I was like, why would I not use all of these things? This is a toolbox. I'm gonna use all of the fucking tools, and I'm just gonna try and push myself. So, from the sticker was like, well, that's level 1. Yeah. That's like always a consistent. Yeah. Stencils, okay, that's level 2. That's always a consistent. Okay, fly posters, postering 3. Just building up that toolbox, the arsenal of parts that I can tap into at any point to apply.
These are weapons, see? All these weapons.
I mean, yeah, in a way.
At this point, big up Kish Cash, because it was him that connected us finally, which I'm very grateful for. And he met you at your more recent exhibition.
Yeah, so he met me at Stolen Space,
Yeah, how was that?
It was awesome. I run Stolen Space, I own Stolen Space for 25 years now.
Really? Wow.
Which is no mean feat. Running a gallery, as you understand, is it's a lot of work, a lot of energy. So big up to everybody behind Stolen Space as well. And I was a collaboration show with Kai and Sonny. Kai I've known since I was at university. And he went down a different path. He did a clothing label for a bit. I was already establishing what I was doing in the streets. And we've always kept in touch. And he quite a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I forget exactly now, he come to me and was like, I want to start doing gallery shows. You know, I'm kind of done with the clothing side of things. And I'm working on these pieces. And I was like, they're sick, dude. 100%, we'll show them in the gallery and let's see where that goes. So gave him his first solo show, and it's amazing to see his development as an artist and his trajectory as an artist. And then, you know, a little while ago, he had the idea of collaborating on some work. And I was like, it's really interesting because what you do is not what I could do. You have a very particular style, a very particular aesthetic. And it would be really interesting to see what we can mix up and mash and create. And I love what we've created because it leans heavily on both of us and creates something very unique. It's not, I could not do what he does and he wouldn't do what I do. So it's a really nice true collaboration. Like I say, our friendship's over 30 years old. So
that's crazy.
It felt right. It felt right to do it.
Yeah, for sure. Collaborations. I mean, you mentioned Banksy. We've had Obey on the podcast. What do you look for in the? What do you look for in your case? Because you're so, you're so mixed medium, and different, and stylistically you can lean on anything. But do you need an anchor partner that kind of narrows the field a little bit more? Do you have to conceptualize stuff?
Yeah, it's tricky. You're right. It's tricky because I mean, I always say when anybody approaches me, I'm like, I want you to do what you do, and I can't replicate it, and you don't want to replicate what I do. You know, you could go off and mimic what I do, no problem. But can I mimic what you do? And can you mimic what I do? No, then that's a true collaboration. Let's keep our integrity and our individual components. So be that if that's a brand, you know, that comes to me and is like, hey, we want to collaborate. I'm like, well, what do you want to do? And why are you asking me to do it? Like, let's have that conversation first before we get onto what it is, because I need to understand your intention.
Okay, cool. Hold on. It's the intentions. Because that's really where the integrity lies, isn't it?
Yeah.
With any artist. Some people jump in. I mean, I've done plenty of jump-ins. My integrity's at the door. I'm like, let's go.
It's on the way out.
But when you're working so closely to the street and the moral compass of like punk and hip hop and graffiti like that, that's a really important point.
You know better as well as anybody what that's like, and it's a really fine line. It's a hard line to walk, you know, because there's times when you knowingly are compromising and feeling like you're compromising, and there's times where you're like hardline, no, I'm not going to compromise,
and it hurts because you're just like, oh man, I don't want to say no to this, but even the way that they're talking around the desk is like, nah, fuck this.
You know straight away.
Yeah, you just
and there's got to be times where, and there's been plenty of times where I've just sat there and gone, ain't happening.
Yeah.
And upset a few people along that path where they're like, but why wouldn't you? You're going to turn this money down. I'm like, you don't seem to understand, because it's not about the money, it's about the authenticity of what we're doing here, and I'll get called out on it. You know, it's very easy to see through something. So when anybody comes to me, like I'm doing a project now where a father and son race team came to me and were like, will you paint our race car? And I was like,
oh, is that why you're up there?
Yeah,
banging.
I was like, yeah,
nice.
I love race cars.
Wicked.
I love racing. And they were like, but rather than just paint the car, would you be interested in taking your race license and racing the car? And I was like, fuck yeah. I've always wanted to do that.
That's amazing.
And this is now forcing me to do that thing that I've always wanted to do, which I probably would never have got around to doing because I'm busy.
Yeah.
So this project has forced my hand into going, okay, take your race test, take your race license, race a car.
I love it.
So I'm doing...
Hey, Mum, check this out.
So
you thought me going to America was a mad one. You're going to check this out.
So I took my race test on Friday.
Fantastic.
I'm painting the car at the moment. I literally come from the studio where we're painting it. And then I'll get some seat time in that car. And that to me is like, that's a fucking true collaboration because they're bringing something that I probably wouldn't have done on my own.
Oh, I got goosebumps. That is a proper collaboration.
In a level that I would never have thought of getting to. And so it's those things that they make it interesting. That's what you talked about earlier, that I knew when they asked me 3-4 months ago that I'd get 3 months down the line and go, why the fuck am I doing this? Why am I going to take my race test? I'm nervous, I'm worried, I'm trying to revise, and I hate exams.
Yeah.
but it's pushing myself to be out of my comfort zone and trying to find those things
Oh,
that
that's
does
cool
that.
as fuck, dude.
So that's what I'm in at the moment, you know, and that's
Yeah. Wow. So that's what you're in at the moment.
yeah.
Wow.
So I get in it, and the car's no small car. It's called a Radical S3, which is a aero car. It's a serious, absolute weapon of a car, and I'll be honest with you, for the level I'm at in terms of racing, it's way out of my league. So,
Wow.
yeah,
That's no moon. It's a space station.
Dude, exactly. Great reference.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the collaboration stuff, you know. And like you say, sometimes you have to bite your tongue and get through stuff where you're like, oh god, this is cheesy. I hope this doesn't end up being cheesy. And then you maybe look back on it and it is, and maybe you look back on it and think, actually, it was all right.
In this day and age, and I'm not suggesting that you go ahead and do it, and that nobody out there do anything they don't fancy doing. But in this day and age, it's so transient, isn't it? Like, people's attention, they don't give a fuck. And if anything, they're, like, going back to what we were saying, is like, why aren't you getting paid anyway? I know there has to be a moral compass in all of us. But if you made it this far into your career, there are some things where people can be like, yeah, but let him get his pee.
Yeah, it seems to have
only
changed.
go and get someone else who won't go and get it. Why get the legend do it?
It does seem to have changed a bit. There was a time where it was much more guarded, that you couldn't do those collaborations and you'd get shot down for doing them. Now it seems more like that. We're like, oh yeah, get paid, take that money, do something cool with it.
Yeah.
And I kind of respect that as well. But at the same time, it's a very fine line of walk. You know, McDonald's come calling. Like, are you prepared to collaborate?
There
with them,
are some exceptions to the rules.
Do you know what I mean? And I
sure.
think for me, there is some things that I would never say yes to, and it's irrelevant how much money would be behind it. So, and that's the integrity. But, you know, maybe if McDonald's came with a project and you were like, damn, that's an awesome project, I can do whatever the hell I like.
It's got to be in line to the values of what you stand for.
Yeah. And it's just that it's only in my head. You know, all of it's in my head of where it's right and wrong. But I stand close guardian of those things. You know, and the work that I've put in. And hopefully people understand and respect that.
But and also, ideally, which is probably the case, that your moral compass, people know what to expect from you, so don't call unless it's within this remit.
Yeah, maybe that's why I don't get the calls. Or they're like,
you just jump into like hot rods and stuff.
They're like, he's an arsehole to work with, don't work with him. He says no all the time.
Stop it.
I don't know, dude. When the right ones come, they come, and you know.
Yeah.
You know, and that's all I use, you know. And it's not like the car one. It's not a money deal.
No.
It's
I don't doubt
more.
it.
It's more an experience situation and putting myself in an uncomfortable place.
Yeah.
To get that fix. You
Sounds
know?
quite cooperative. A very cool thing to do, where you're trading skill sets.
Yeah, I love that.
I love that.
You know, I
too.
love that. I think they're the best things. You're like, listen, if you asked me how much I would charge you for it, I would be insulted to send you that amount of money. Do you know what I mean? So why don't we swap? Why don't we trade? You do something, I'll do something.
On that note, because you're a great person to speak about this, because you know you've been in the industry and doing your thing for a long time. The perspective of because this is something that young people specifically, but there's also some elders out there that should know better. The idea of like adding value into something before getting the money back, and the idea of like in cooperation, in a cooperational sense, exactly what we said is like, okay, you ain't got no money, that's absolutely fine. Well, you add value to this, I'll add value to that. I think for community spirit, this is what all of that's all about, isn't it? You can't expect, you know, to get blood out of a stone, and equally you could always add more stones into the pot. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, so true. Yeah,
that shit. Like, and it troubles me now, and I understand why.
Yeah.
But it's all about the community. It's all about.
You know, for me, if I'm doing a mural project, I'd say 90% of them are probably going to cost me money. You know, and the reason why I do them is because they're public facing. I interact with the public, and that's the thing I fucking love doing, dude. I love painting in public domain and having that interaction with people where they're not art educated, they have no idea who you are, no idea what you're doing or why you're doing it, and you get to change someone's perspective.
God, that's cool.
And that is like, that's why I do what I do.
And you get up in the morning and do that every day.
Yeah, well,
fucking cool
as much as I can, dude.
It's
You know,
so cool.
as much as I can. You know, like the murals are taxing, dude.
Yeah,
you know,
of
they're
course.
really fucking hard work.
How long does it take? Yeah, layman's questions. How long does it take you to do a mural? Because you do massive ones, brother. Like,
yeah, it depends on the size, but you know, I'd say regularly it's like 5 to 7 days. But long days on that, and you know, I normally have two people who work with me full time anyway. They're full time assistants in that respect. But I don't want to use the word assistants because it's not that. It's like they're in my studio hanging out. Everything's mutual. Do you know what I mean? We're bouncing ideas around. We all do everything. You know, make tea, sweep the floor, paint a canvas, paint a car. You know,
cool
everyone's involved. And so 5 to 7 days. And again, things like weather, wall surface, all have a variation.
Yeah, of course.
Make a variation in that time, but we're pretty well versed at this point in what we do and how we do it. So, yeah.
It's a lot of work.
It's, you know, I'll be honest with you, as you get a little bit older, it gets harder to be on your feet up 20 stories for, 10 hours a day. It gets taxing, and you start to feel it a little bit more. So, never say never, and I never will stop. But it does start taking its toll.
For sure. Do you think about the Sensors or the Zombies or the Arrows, the Tempo 33s of the world that that again have this multifaceted way about creating, very much like yourself? Are you fans of the other contemporaries that are in the field?
Yeah, man. I love graffiti still.
Yeah.
You know, it's something that's been a part of my life consistently. Probably one of the most consistent things in my life. Paying attention, that and skateboarding, have just been such a part of me. And I've met most of them people, and I pay full respect to what they do.
Coolest fuckers out there,
fucking
mate.
super cool, dude. And when publishing a book for me, my first book was like a big benchmark because I was like, oh, it's set in paper now. Some kid will find that in a library in 10 years' time and pick it up and be like, oh, this was cool. This is cool. What is this? Like I would find a book and be inspired by when I was a teenager. And so that for me was like, okay, I've got the books out there. I can just relax.
That's cool. That's like finding a map.
Yeah.
30 years
Some
from
Goonies
now.
shit.
Yeah, some Goonies shit. Just a cup of pot. That's so fucking cool. I
Yeah.
didn't even thought about that. Dude. Yeah, that's deep. That's
So the
deep.
street, everything in the street is susceptible to the elements, weather, the wind, the rain, whatever. It does its thing and makes it beautiful. And actually, that book is about that, permanently impermanent. As much as we try and make these things permanent, we're all impermanent. And so why are we fighting against that? Just embrace that, and the thing that it becomes can be more beautiful than the thing it was created. It's often these stickers that are like painted over, buffed, scratched. They become beautiful in their own right, and they're unique because that's never going to happen again. The murals where there's one in LA where a sofa got set on fire below it, and half the wall was burnt away, and I was like, that's fucking sick,
genius,
dude.
yeah.
I could never do that, and nor would anybody let
It's
me
like
do
when
that.
I said that you dropped it by mistake, and I was like, well, that's the art in it. That's the ego. That's an even better story.
And that's that book. That book is about the journey of artwork before, during, and after, and how much of that is out of my control and how much of that is in my control. And those happy accidents that you get in the studio versus the happy accidents that happen in the street are out of my control. And I love that. Like the wrinkles on someone's face, that tells a story, and it's that story that I'm interested in. I'm not interested that you've had plastic surgery. That eliminates your life story. And so I'm more interested in those things. I don't want to see someone that looks skin stretched over their face that's got rid of the laughter wrinkles, where it shows that they've laughed a lot.
Thought of that before. Wow.
That for me is where the interest in people comes.
That's so fucking sick.
It's like you travel to cities and they all become homogenised. You see the Starbucks, the McDonald's, the Night store. The I don't want that. I'm not interested in that, dude. I want to go to a city where it's a complete culture shock.
Yeah.
I don't speak the language.
What's the last city that did that?
South Korea was
Pretty mental,
yeah, because it's a hard city to navigate. There's very little English being spoken. There's no English signs. The subway system's really hard to use, and that's fucking awesome. It's a place you can get lost, and I really like that.
That's cool as fuck.
And then the little weird places I get to find out, and discover. I love them weird places that you wouldn't necessarily go in any way. I mean, you might find yourself in South Korea to see the city.
Yeah.
But those little weird, fuck nowhere towns where you're like, well, what the hell am I doing here? That's cool.
Yeah, that's cool as fuck.
Yeah, because
Never in my life did you ever think that kind of.
Yeah, like I've been to Arkansas, and you're like, it's proper old cowboy town, scary. And I'm like, I would never have got here under any other circumstances. And what am I doing? I'm painting a wall. What crazy ride is this? You know, what the hell?
Yeah.
You know, I went to Eleuthera in like the Bahamas.
Really?
Yeah, and I'm like, it's a tiny, tiny island with pretty much only locals, no tourism. And I'm like, why and what am I doing here? And it's those where they're like, I feel uncomfortable. You know, I'm like, oh God, I feel slightly like I could. Am I going to make it off this island alive? And those things make stories.
Wow.
So yeah.
What's the craziest? You know, going to the recesses. What is the most craziest thing that's ever happened to you while posting up, piecing up?
I nearly died in Amsterdam. I nearly slipped into the canal. I was climbing around there was a stair set that went up and it was closed off. It had metal railings going around it, but they were open on the river side.
Right.
And the staircase overhung the river, the canal.
Got you.
And we were climbing up it and around it, and then going upstairs, climbing up and around it, climbing up and around it to put a fucking massive poster up at the top. And it was fine going up, but what I hadn't accounted for is my hands would be freezing cold on the way down, and I'd be covered in paste on the way back down. So as I come back down, I did the first two, no problem, got to the third one, and I was like, I could feel my hands like slipping as I'm trying to get round to the point of where I was like, I'm kind of fucked. Like I have to jump around and hope I land on the pavement, or I'm going to fall into like the canal.
So it's winter.
It was dead of winter. Yeah.
It's cold as fuck. It's
Cold
windy
as
as
fuck,
fuck.
yeah. It's bitter
Yeah.
in Amsterdam, and so I took a leap of faith and made it onto the pavement, and I was like, that was fucking close.
Yeah, because you would have fallen straight.
Yeah.
You would have.
Oh, I would have been gone.
Immediately,
Unquestionably gone. Because I was high enough up where I'd have gone under the water and been washed away, and my friend who would have been on the pavement, there wasn't a bank that you could run down into to get me.
Fucking hell.
So that was a pretty sketchy. And then some murals, we've been doing some murals where we've been trapped at the top of the mural and had to climb out over, and we're talking like 14 stories up where you're climbing up over.
Dude.
On, you know, pulling yourself up and over. They're pretty sketchy.
can't cope with that.
They're pretty sketchy. And I don't love heights. You know, people are like, oh, you must love heights. I was like, no, I don't love heights. I just want to get the job done and I want to see the paint on the wall. So.
And it's the reliance on your own body and willpower that troubles me.
Yeah.
You mentioned age and, you know, time, father time. But as I do get older, I do recognise my own mortality. In certain
you do that, don't you?
Yeah. Do you ever reflect and say to yourself, Jesus? Like,
yeah, I'll yeah, of course, dude.
Yeah.
You know, but in my head, I'm still 19, so I battle a lot with that. And there's been a couple of times, you know, where I'm like, I can't do that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not that age. You know,
Yeah.
From like even skateboarding, dude. You know, I broke my wrist like a year ago trying to do something I got no place to be doing. You know,
got no business to be there.
Really, I was like, what was I thinking? You know, I'm not. The skill set's not there, and the age isn't there. Like, back away. You know, enjoy what you're able to do, and then just lean into that rather than trying to. Because I'm always trying to one up myself. You know, so I'm not content with. Oh, I'm just having a carve around. I'm happy with that. No. I've got to be trying to do something else. So I'm always trying to push myself, and I've been trying to, with particularly the skating, just lean into being happy to be outside on a lovely morning with a couple of the old guys that go skating at the same time and just having a nice time doing it and just enjoy it, rather than being like, oh, you've got to be the best you can be at it. Yeah. Which is it's difficult, you know. And I've done that with motorcycle racing. I've tried to race bikes and broke my foot in 5 places just because I was getting carried away. My head is like, oh, you can go faster, you can corner harder. And then the next thing you know is just sliding across the track with the bike trapped on your foot, and I broke my foot. And I'm like, what was I thinking? Like, I know I can't ride that fast, you know, but I can't stop myself.
It's the athleticism. It's the b-boy. It's the skate or die in you. You know.
It's the self-competitive competition. I'm trying to better myself. You know what it's like. You're always trying to up your game, and you know you've been there. You know, trying to just push yourself, and get either in your own head about it or something fails.
Yeah. I always love it, but I think you're in a similar place where, you know, I always used to be competitive until I realised I was looking in the mirror the whole time.
Exactly.
You know, there's no one else really. It's just my own, like, go on, get him. You know?
No, that's exactly it, dude. I'm competing with myself, and I'm aware of that. You know, it's like I can't take my foot off the gas. but who am I racing?
Yeah.
There's no one else around, dude. You're on
invisible
your
man.
you're on your own, dude. Just have it. It can be what it can be.
Yeah.
So there's like those lessons to myself, which I'm learning.
Yeah.
A little bit too late to be maybe fair, but just enjoying what I'm doing, leading more into enjoyment, and rather than it's a marathon, it's not a sprint.
Yeah.
So like teaching myself that still.
That's awesome.
I want to be doing this until my ripe old age.
Ripe old.
Yeah.
Well, so do we. We'd
Yeah.
look, and brother, thank you so much for joining us. So, any information that you'd like to pass on to the public of what's going on, exhibition wise?
Yeah, check out Stolen Space.
Yep, there
We've
we
got
go.
a show on there at the moment. Stolen Space is, we're still running 25 years deep.
Crazy.
Which that's a tough hustle, man, to keep
Yeah,
that thing
of course.
going. So
It's tough enough with this place.
Y- y-
25 years.
yeah,
Anyway.
independent gallery, no
Yeah.
no private funding. We'd love to get
Yeah.
some government grants and stuff, but
Yeah.
that ain't
No, it
happening.
doesn't
And,
work like that,
and
no.
we support that subculture,
Yeah.
those subcultures, and that's what we've done
Yeah.
since day one. And I believe in that, and that's
Yeah.
why it still goes.
Yeah.
So check out Stolen Space, and then just keep an eye on the streets. Yeah, just that's it, innit?
Keep an eye on the streets. See, D, it's been an absolute pleasure, my
Thank
brother.
you so much
Really
for your time,
appreciate you
brother.
coming
It's
through.
been an honour.
I've got plans for these stickers. Yeah, Killa Kela podcast outlighting was out of fashion, all right. If you ain't inspired by it now, and I don't know where you are right now. Remember, crime don't pay, but neither do they. So don't talk to anyone I wouldn't. You stay lucky, people, all right? Easy. Yeah, that was fucking sick.